at International Bipolar Foundation for inviting me to speak today. And thank you to everyone who is listening today, this morning, whatever time zone you happen to be in. Just a little bit more about what I do professionally is as a clergy person in the United Methodist Church. I'm located here in the Chicago area, so I am under the bishop in the Northern Illinois Conference. I've been a congregational pastor my entire ministry until 2011, when, after the death of my son Dan, who I'll talk a great deal about more coming up, I had a change that I worked out with my bishop to focus on mental health, education, advocacy, raising awareness, and I'm very grateful to the foresight of my bishop for helping me to make this specialized ministry happen, because not only in the church, but in, obviously, as we know, in recent events in the last few years, that there definitely needs to be a public dialogue on mental health and how we can all partner together. So my plan is, let me turn the slide here. My plan is to break this time down into three segments. And so the first segment, I'm going to provide a foundation with thoughts about the concept of resilience, what this is and why it matters in the dialogue on bipolar disorder. And there's also information that I will share about the relationships with bipolar disorder, migraine, and fibromyalgia that I also live with. And these can be missed by primary care doctors and makes treatment of each one and much more difficult. In the second segment, I'm going to share parts of my own story that include my personal journey and also address my profession as a clergy person. And my son Dan really, though, has the center stage here. His beautiful life and his struggles with migraine and bipolar disorder speak to the challenges of treatment for young adults. And then in the final segment, I offer my approach that is a beginning framework, a beginning approach to focus on building a resilient life. And through this part, I'll also include some of my own challenges and successes in this area. And just to say, I'm always in process of working on resiliency. It's a lifelong journey, and my journey is my journey, and I hope that you will find points of connection with this. Your journey, though, is your individual path through life. Take from this time what is going to work best for you, that you can learn from and share with someone else, I hope. So I look at what I call the whole person language of resiliency. I start my day and then I end my day by looking at this piece of art that hangs in my home. And I remind myself that I am indeed a precious person. I'm a precious human being. I remember that what I'm about for that day and the evening is significant and meaningful. I might not bring peace to earth in these 24 hours, but I can contribute to peace for myself and others, and in particular for those who are peers living with bipolar disorder and parents who have lost a child. And I have my son Dan's photo on my dresser along with my other son John. And I remember that each one of them is precious as I begin my day. And I take a slow, deep breath. And I do this to help myself not get caught up in the frenzy of my day. And I know that I'm certainly not alone in having fast-paced days. So I see, I remember, and I use my body to breathe as ways to help center myself. I try to be intentional about tapping into what I call the mind-body-spirit connection. I hope you can remember today, in whatever time zone you're in, that you too are precious. My wellness is centered on integrating the needs of the mind, body, and spirit. While each of this part of a person has a particular way of contributing to recovery strategies and sustaining wellness, drawing on all of these areas makes my resilient life possible and a reality. With bipolar disorder, living with migraines and fibromyalgia, and particularly as a mother losing a son to bipolar disorder, I feel that these have made me feel even more deeply and strengthened my ability to relate more empathetically and compassionately to people. I believe I'm a better wife, a better mother, and a better minister for this. I take better care of myself, and I really have come to know myself in such a way that I would not have been able to without this journey. Having said all of that, I'm sure everyone knows and in their own life feels like no one would ever choose any of this. But I feel like I can be strengthened from all of this. Hope and Resilience did a little do-si-do there as they came onto the screen. When I was in grade school, my parents were avid square dancers, and so I spent some time at square dances with them and even learned how to do a few of the moves. So that's a little tribute to my parents there. I want to bring the concept of resilience into the bipolar dialogue, not to set aside talking about recovery and wellness, but to bring to light what is possible really beyond the language of illness. Every human being has that innate capacity for resilience, and I think those living with bipolar disorder especially need to hear this, to believe it, and to live it. Resilience focuses on living from an inner center of strength, courage, power, wisdom, and spiritual connectedness, along with outer sources of physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual supports. The language of resilience incorporates both the many sources of inner and outer strengths that enable really triumphant, powerful living that comes from overcoming the adversities of life. I pair resilience and hope as I see that resilience really springs from hope. In my life, hope is what keeps me moving forward. Although I'll say sometimes it is moving forward from 1 hour into the next hour, but more and more hope gives me the centering and strength for the coming months and now for years ahead. This happens, though, by tapping into all the capacities and qualities I have that I really treasure as being able to help me soar in my life as a resilient person. And I'll share more about what this means as we go on. Here's a reflection that I wrote that sums up how I understand resiliency in my life. So I'm just going to read this. Adversity in its many faces, for those who live with bipolar disorder and their families and friends, does not have to tear down, break apart, or destroy lives. We can thrive in wellness strategies, trust and draw upon our own inner strengths and wisdom, be courageously triumphant, be a beacon of hope for others, soar beyond even our own expectations, give deeply of ourselves to family and friends, and treasure the gift of each day because we are resilient, beautiful people in mind, body, and spirit. I've offered that as my own thought. There are definitions of resiliency and strategies to develop and strengthen the components of resiliency in articles and books. I commend to you the American Psychological Association brochure titled The Road to Resilience, and also the Mayo Clinic website on resiliency. I feel, though, that in our community, we need to have a clear and strong approach that is particular to bipolar disorder, to be able to claim and really name and live this very unique type of resiliency. This next screen shows wise words from two young men in the DBSA support group that I facilitate. And we talked about what resiliency means. And these two young men sitting on each side of me spoke up right away. I had their permission to share their comments with you. One young man left Chicago gang life, and the other is living by himself for the first time. And as we were talking and after they shared, I told them how very honored I felt and encouraged I was from their experience and wisdom. Here's what they shared. Resilience is motivation and drive within yourself. It is being okay with being by yourself. It is focusing on the present moment, rising above circumstances, not returning violence with violence. The more often you do it, the easier it gets. Resilience is having a lot of hope and faith. No matter how many times you get knocked down, you get up. The key is to not start giving up. Take joy in the little things, then the party will come to you. I just love the last one. The party will come to you. This saying here, screen, is a poster that hangs in the waiting room of my neurologist, and I read this to myself at every visit. There are misconceptions about headache and migraine sufferers that are stereotyping and judgmental, and I find there are unfortunately similarities of the same stigma statements that go with bipolar disorder and other mood disorders. What I've rewritten for myself is to include today I live with bipolar disorder added to today I have a headache, and today I have a fibromyalgia flare-up, And then looking at the end of the saying, I have a headache because my body has this disorder, I've added, I live with bipolar disorder because my body has this disorder. I have fibromyalgia because my body has this disorder. And it reminds me that living with all of this is not my fault. It comes from the brain, and I really need to give myself self-compassion and kindness. This is a bit about fibromyalgia if you're not familiar with it. Mayo Clinic has an excellent write-up on fibromyalgia on its website. If you wonder what does it feel like, the best way to describe it is like there's a terrible, terrible flu of the aches and pains that you can hardly move. I describe my own presentation of symptoms in the points where I swell and have my hot spots on my body, especially around my knees and my hands. Like someone put an iron to those parts of my body and I'm sizzling from being burned by an iron. It's kind of a graphic description, but that's how it feels. And when it's all over my body, the pain, I describe that as feeling like I've gotten beat up by a baseball bat. You can read there on the screen the physiological presentations. What is important to note is that psychological stress and that anxiety and depression are part of some of the ways that fibromyalgia is a symptom that is part of living with fibromyalgia. And here you can see in the next screen about the way that migraine, fibromyalgia, and bipolar disorder present together. Dr. Robbins has spoken about and written about the co-occurrence of migraine and bipolar disorder and depression. So I just want to read this to you because I think it speaks to how we in the mental health community can help expand the conversation to look at the whole physical body, to look at what is encompassed in the whole person, mind, body, spirit, but to look at a broader presentation of physical conditions. 8 to 9% of migraineurs have bipolar disorder. 30% of bipolar disorder people have migraine. A mood disorder often begins before the headaches. In bipolar disorder, there is often earlier depression and anxiety by the age of 13 to 15. The family history in those in the bipolar spectrum may include substance abuse, mood disorders, and psychiatric hospitalization. Depression may fuel headaches, and headaches may fuel depression. Both must be addressed and treated. And in my situation, all of this speaks absolutely true to my life. Both depression and migraines have gone together, and certainly my mood disorder is definitely connected to what happens with migraine and fibromyalgia. To look back at resilience, I mentioned the APA brochure, The Road to Resilience. Here is the definition that is in this brochure, and there are two words in here that I just want to raise for all of us to think about, is the word adapting, and then the phrase bouncing back. When I first read this, I thought, this is helpful, lays out some framework here. But as I have done much more work on resilience in my life, I think adapting and bouncing back don't adequately express what the bipolar experience is like around resilience. Maybe it works for you. I found it didn't quite work for me. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about myself. I have this particular piece of art that sits on my desk. I bring it to the DBSA support group that I lead. And it reminds me that every person matters. And my story is uniquely mine. I have my own culture, I have my family circumstances, my social network, and my everyday experience. We do, though, in those who live with mood disorders, have many points of connection, and that's where we can learn and grow and rely on each other and be supporters of one another. At the support group, I hear over and over again, I do not feel so alone. I only got dressed today because I was coming here. And I also facilitate a support group for family members and friends. And the I do not feel so alone now is echoed there again over and over. In the introduction, Deborah mentioned that I had written a chapter in this book, Speaking Out. The chapter is titled, Your Story Matters. When Bishop Peggy Johnson invited me to write a chapter in the book in August of 2011 to tell my story and about my connection with faith and the church, I was still quite a bit emotionally raw as we had just lost Dan, June 6, 2011. But I decided I wanted to go ahead and write the chapter as an opportunity to really speak honestly and in a deep way, not only to faith communities, but to people like all of us and more beyond our network of friends and colleagues. I will say, though, that you see the title that has their disabilities, and I so I respect my denomination for supporting this book and making it actually be published. In our peer community, we talk about the use of the word disabilities and what that means to us, and so I raise that as something for conversation in our own communities and how we feel about that. There's a bit of fun to take you into my early world. Some brief background on how I came to have my diagnosis in 2006. Here's just a brief rundown of my life from 1998 to 2006. I started back to graduate school for my second master's degree in 1998. I completed a master's degree in theology and a PhD in 5 years, commuting 30 miles each way to school. Needless to say, I barely ate, I hardly slept. I had pressure from exams, and I was traveling for my dissertation research. At the same time, I was working part-time in a church and then later full-time. My husband and I had 2 boys in school, sports, there was homework, friends, and some challenging teenage years. My husband commuted to Chicago a total of 3 hours every day. I ended up with a very long commute to the church where I'm at currently in downtown Chicago. I started that new church in 2005. So you can see that I was just ripe for a meltdown. And what happened one day in 2006, I was standing on the corner of Madison and Wacker in downtown Chicago, and pretty much fell apart. It's all I could do to find a coffee shop, get on the phone, call my neurologist, and say, what the heck is happening to me? And so that really started my long journey into diagnosis and recovery, wellness, and resiliency. I'll share with you the event that is really etched in my brain, and I'm sure this is for many when you received the official diagnosis. This is the event as it happened for me. Here's my description. When I was told my bipolar diagnosis in 2006, I was sitting on the floor of my therapist's office with my back against the couch. We had been meeting for 2 months. I always refused to sit on the couch and opted for an uncomfortable chair or the floor. It was my passive-aggressive way of saying, I really do not need to be here. It was near the end of the session, and he finally said, we've been talking about your history for 2 months now, and I'm sure you're wondering what I'm thinking. You have bipolar disorder. You have had this since a young age. He actually said this more kindly than it sounds. I felt like I had the wind knocked out of me. He was speaking a foreign language. I had no idea what he was talking about. I'd never heard of bipolar disorder, even after 5 years of theological graduate school and working with people as a minister most of my professional life. I left the office, walked back to the church, and led the 5 p.m. prayer service, hoping I made some sense. This began a very long and hard journey of putting my life back together. I now know that this was the beginning of discovering a much richer life, and I would have never believed it, though, sitting there in the office in 2006. As I worked through my recovery and learned key wellness strategies, I'll say that cognitive behavioral therapy really was my lifesaver. I relearned my self-identity. I claimed myself from being a failure, a burden, inadequate, ashamed, embarrassed. All of this whole negative self-esteem and self-concepts rewired into really seeing my strengths and my successes, my ways of relating to people that brought richness to my life and to theirs, stronger ways of communicating with my husband, who's really been my rock and partner through everything that we've experienced in recent years. I have the word manage here because my life has really been managed mode. It was at first primarily. Managed really took up my whole day, all of my energy. My journals are filled with this word written in ways that show that I was angry and resentful, even around some of these more positive ways of managing that I'm bringing up here on the screen, like meditation, awareness, gratitude. But you can see that I have been able to put into place really the best of my life strategies that help me just on a daily basis. And I felt quite guilty actually spending so much time and energy on taking care of myself. But I'll tell you right now, I do not feel 1 ounce of guilt for spending all of this energy and time of taking care of myself, because it's what I really need to do. This is what I call a resiliency cloud. It's taken from my journals with all the different words of that I had written in them as I went back in putting this word cloud together. And later on, take a look at it. I just find it very refreshing, fun, and insightful to take a look at this. Resiliency means looking extra hard to see beauty in places where others walk away. I do not have the ultimate answer to suffering, but I choose to find beauty on the other side of suffering. And, you know, I'll say that I make a choice, you know, every day to live with beauty, to see the goodness in others and myself. And I make the choice to not live a normal life. That might sound odd, but I really have made the choice that I don't want to be normal. I don't even want a new normal. I want to live an extraordinary life. I want to be extraordinary. And I really am extraordinary, because if I don't claim that for myself, nobody else will. So that's really the ground and center of how I understand myself. DBSA, as I've talked about a little bit, has been the organization, and the whole family, I call them family now, have been such a support to myself and to my husband and my son, John. I attended the peer specialist training of DBSA in the spring of 2011 as a continuing education for my ministry. And once I learned, though, about the support groups and the way that the over 500 chapters in the United States really serve on the ground the needs of so many people, my husband and family and 2 sons at that point, we decided to found a chapter. It's called the DBSA Chicago Loop Chapter. It's located in downtown Chicago, and we began having support groups starting in the summer of 2011, and I'm just proud to be part of the DBSA organization. This is a brief 2-minute clip that talks about what it's like to be in the helping profession and what it means to disclose, because that's been an important part of my journey. And I hope this would give some encouragement to others in helping professions to talk about living with bipolar disorder. Give me just a second here to get this up and to get it on the right time. Let's see, I think this is it. Let's try this. Okay, there we go. Hold on, I didn't want to go from the start. 1 second. Share a story.
So with educating yourself and others and finding forums to speak up in and
Yes.
let people know who you are and your journey, all ways to combat stigma. With respect to disclosure, you had a very positive experience disclosing in a workplace setting. When do you think it's advisable to disclose, and when might you be less likely to disclose your diagnosis? How do you handle that, say, in the workplace?
There is a lot at stake in a workplace setting. Will my boss fire me? Will my boss just look for mistakes now? Will there be a rumor mill about me? What is to gain at work from disclosing can be adjustments like I was able to get in how a job is structured. So we work together with my projects, my programs, my teaching, working with families, so that schedule, having a more steady schedule, not working 12-hour days constantly, which is normal at that church. So really working with what I need to be able to be successful. And I think particularly in the helping community, that helpers who are professionals to disclose,
to say, I'm living successfully. And bipolar disorder in my life makes me a more compassionate and empathetic person in my profession. So I hope that more helpers in the profession would talk about their life as a person living successfully with bipolar disorder.
Great. Thank you so much, Cheryl, for your time today. It's been great to talk with you.
Thank you, Alan. I appreciate this, and I so appreciate the support of you and of everyone at DVSA.
Oh, thank you.
Just to make a comment on this, this is part of the educational video library series that DVSA has up on their YouTube channel, and I commend you to check that out. There are excellent educational videos on depression and bipolar disorder that you'll find just very useful, very helpful. What was a result of me talking at work was that the comment I heard was, and spoken to me, was, wow, now we really understand you better. We know how you work. We know that you don't need to be holed up in your office instead of eating. We can invite you out to lunch with us. We can help you manage your schedule and be a team. And it was really such a relief to have that conversation with my colleagues. So this is my son, Dan, and what a beautiful, beautiful man. We lost him at age 23. I'll say a bit about his journey. The photo on the right is my husband, Pete, our son John's girlfriend, Ariel, my son John, and myself at the 2011 Out of the Darkness walk. And that was quite soon, several months just after he died, and what a healing experience it was to participate in this walk. People were laughing, chanting names. We saw signs with "We love you." People wore T-shirts with their loved ones, face and name on it, and I just found it to be quite a healing experience. And so, besides numbers and raising dollars, it was just a bonding of people, strangers coming together, and I just hope that anyone would go and participate in that walk. This saying is Dan, true Dan. It comes from this book, It's Not Easy Being Green, this little tiny book that Dan really fell in love with. Every time we moved, he made sure that I had it and packed it. I lost it, bought another one, pretended I hadn't lost it. And he just resonated so much with this book, and I think the title really says about Dan's journey. Sometimes it wasn't just easy being Dan, but what a beautiful, lovely, talented person he was. So just a bit about him, proud mother. He wanted to be a creative writer and then go get a degree in creative writing, then go to law school. I thought he was going to use his creative writing to win his court cases. Family was everything to him, close to his grandparents and cousins, and of course best friends with his brother John, just a year apart. Dan was very funny. He just kept us all laughing. And his friends, he made friends that he kept for a lifetime. We didn't move out of town, and when he was in high school and his first year in college, he would say, well, I just had pizza or burgers or went out with so-and-so, and I'd say, who is that? And he said, well, don't you remember from first grade? I said, no, I don't. But that's how Dan was, friends for a lifetime, and that's why this saying just was so appropriate. And to have read, and two friends read this at his memorial service. So Dan really suffered migraines, and they got quite bad in high school. Senior year in high school, he spent a lot of days in bed, missed a lot of school. He was on shots that really didn't help him very much. He got quite depressed. He did start seeing a therapist in senior year in high school that helped him quite a bit. He clicked instantly with this therapist. At that time, diagnosed him with depression. He was able to go to college, had a successful, wonderful freshman year. Sophomore year, we saw he started to struggle quite a bit more. He had 2 severe panic attacks at that time, and his friends took him to the emergency room. He called us one day and said, "Mom and Dad, I've got to come home and leave school because of these panic attacks." So he came home, and nothing more helpless than watching your child have a panic attack, and you know, there's hardly anything a person can do to help. So he moved in with us and started seeing a therapist and a psychiatrist to get medication, and started to get better, and went back to college here, though, in Chicago. And we had seen so much improvement in him. And then, of course, you know, as parents, we sometimes just don't know what's happening with our children, even though we try, you know, as hard as we possibly can to help. We got a phone call from him on February 5th in the middle of the night and said, "Dad, come get me." And on that date, he had a suicide plan. We tried to get him into one of the major hospitals in Chicago for a suicide watch. They would only take him if he had a substance abuse problem. After making 3 more phone calls, I was ready to lie and say he did have a substance abuse problem. We finally did find a hospital that would take him, and I'm telling you, it was the most nightmarish experience for him and for us possible. We eventually, with the help of his psychiatrist on the phone, finding a different facility, taking a private ambulance, we were able to get him into the place where he really needed to be. That was the best place for him for 48 hours. He was released with medication, a new diagnosis, and immediately the next day, he immediately moved in with us, and the next day began a PHP program at Rush Presbyterian Hospital here in Chicago in the mood disorder clinic for young adults. And really, this was where he worked out the hard stuff. The strong medications. We saw his self-esteem just dip as he struggled with medication. He had to make new friends. And in this program, I'll say, he made very close friends, and that really became his support through the time that he was there. He began to slowly move out from our home into his own condo. He got reaccepted into his previous college, and he was getting ready to go back to school. We had plans to go and find him an apartment. And June 6, 2011, we got the phone call from the Chicago Police Department that he had died. And of course, you know, the nightmare, you know, that follows. Excuse me. I will say that support just poured out from everywhere possible, of course, from our immediate family, especially from my close clergy colleagues. I'll say so many thanks to all of them. I want to share what happened at his visitation and memorial service that I think is something that we can all take away from why it's important to share our stories. Because time and time again, a person would take myself aside or my husband and say, you know, I have bipolar disorder and I just don't know what to do. I don't know where to go. I don't know how to get help. You know, I know this isn't the right time for you, but can we talk later? So even when my husband went back to work, he had people stop in his office and talk to him about their own life or a family member. And we just found that we needed to, as we were ready and as we began to heal, to really talk about Dan, to talk about myself, to really begin to open the door and break down some of the barriers that exist, so that people can find a comfort, help, a lifeline, just to find a way to start to put lives together. So that's really about Dan. I hope if you take anything away from all of this, you take Dan's story away with you. I know we don't have a lot of time left, so we have probably no time left. So I'm just going to go through this framework briefly. What I'm going to put on this slide presentation that I don't have done yet, but it will be in the slides when this is put up on the website, is 2 slides that can be easily copied and run off, sent out with this framework in a readily usable format that you can use that's different from the slides that I'm going to show you. So take what I and show you here and just make it your own. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about these capacities, these qualities that I call them: courage, tenacity, humor, spirituality, joy, gratitude, and of course, there are more: wisdom, kindness, compassion, self-compassion, that can be brought into qualities of resilience. I look at this through the framework of questions and self-reflection. What is it that we can chew on, think about as we're walking, as we're sitting, going through our days, that can help us build up a resilient life? So here's a quote from Eleanor Roosevelt that's at the top of your screen. Questions, though, that can help you think about courage. What are the situations that you've been courageous? How can you think back on a situation that maybe you thought, didn't quite feel like I was making it through this, but wow, maybe I really did, and learn from that. And you don't have to be tapping into courage on your own. Other people can help you with this. So at the bottom it says, you are an amazing, beautiful, courageous person. At the Family and Friends Support Group, we look at each other and say that to each other at the end of each of our meetings. Tenacity, really this is what keeps us going, and really sometimes tenacity has to be kind of in your face kind of tenacity, and I think that's okay. I think I've developed a little bit more easy kind of tenacity, but every once in a while that edge comes out. This is me when I was, let me back up here, see if I have the right, yeah, this is me when I was hiking in Spain, and I think my tenacity actually was just in finding my way home because I got lost so many times. Basically, I keep saying to myself, what was I thinking? Humor is really, I think, the core. Let me go back here. Humor is really the core of, sorry about that, is really the core of resiliency. If we can't laugh at ourselves, then what else can we do? So humor can diffuse a situation, and we can look back at ourselves and say, that really was kind of funny, even though it didn't feel like it at the time. I just have to say, we have 2 cats in my household, and I laugh at my cats all the time, and I take a lot of photos of my cats, and I just look at these photos, and the only response I can have is just to laugh. And spirituality is for myself, is at the center of my own life. Hold on. I'm doing a research project on spirituality, and that can mean have so many different meanings for each individual. So I encourage everyone to do some thinking about inspiration, wisdom, meaning, and purpose in their life. Joy really has 2 sides to it: joy and sorrow. I think we can't know joy without experiencing and working through sorrow. I have myself playing the piano there because music has been an essential part of my life, and I rediscovered and reclaimed piano is a part of my life just in the last year and a half. Really, that is my therapy. I love it. And I just hope everyone can find some part of joy in their life like I have with music. Gratitude really comes about through looking at the components of, whoops, sorry about that, folks. I'm trying to speed through here a little bit. Through kindness, then we experience being grateful, and being grateful leads us to giving back. And all of this is relational, and resiliency and living with bipolar disorder, just relationships are so key, and gratitude is just a center for relationships. Here's a little poem from my journal that I'll leave you with. You can read that. I'm so sorry, folks. Read that on your own and in a quiet time, and just that's a gift from me to you. These are resource organizations that I hope you'll take a look at. Notice Laughter Yoga International. Yes, you can be certified as a laughter instructor. So take a look at all of these, and you can find some excellent resources and ways to be advocates and to work against stigma and to educate yourself and others. There's my email, and email me if you would like to participate in my research project on spirituality and bipolar disorder with a brief phone interview. So thank you. And I know we're so out of time, but I don't know if anyone wants to stay online and ask questions. Deborah, are you there?
Yes, hi Cheryl. Thank you so much. That was wonderful. Go ahead and type in your questions on your control panel if you have one. Okay, Cheryl, here's the first question. What would important steps be to connect young people in a church community to mental health resources?
Young people, I'm thinking young adults, maybe adolescents. A church faith community, one of the first things that I do when I go to a new church is to find out who are the service providers in my community, and to be able to be a resource then for people in my church to be able to connect them with people in the community. So faith communities, please do find out what the resources are in your community. Put that into a handout, a write-out, talk about this in education programs and services so that you can be a resource link between people who are coming into the congregation and then into the community. Often, you know, a young person is not going to talk to a parent first, but might talk to someone in the church that they have a good rapport with. So it's important for that person really to be ready to resource. And actually, I'll say to all of the faith community leaders is, please know when you need to refer to a professional. I'm quite aware that I am not a licensed therapist, and that there are times when I do need to refer, and to have those referral connections ready at hand is important.
Great, thank you. Next question. What do you do for people you believe have mental health issues when they think there's not a problem? How can we help?
Well, I think, you know, as I think about, with my son Dan, where he did not want to go to a therapist when I knew he was depressed, just over and over, I sat with him and listened to what was going on in his life. And DBSA has this handout called What Helps, What Hurts, on ways to communicate just in these kinds of situations, such as, I'm here, I'm listening. What can I do to help you? And it's just feeling very helpless as a parent, as a loved one, a friend, when you see someone suffering and that person won't get help.
Thank you. Next question. I am finding it hard to bounce back to the life I had before my diagnosis 5 years ago. I have made many advances, but still lack the stamina to be self-supporting. What can I do to help regain my independence?
Not sure what stamina, means. I'm sure there are a lot of components, to that. Just, physical energy, all of the different, components around giving up, not giving up. I'm not sure kind of what independence, it means. There are a lot of different levels, of independence. I think one of the best things to do is to let other people help. It's very hard sometimes to admit that a person needs help, or it's hard to find people who understand, what's needed without being judgmental, who can help. I'll say, support groups, with my experience with support groups, are just places to begin to find people who can help with independence, to help with strategies to have stamina, all of those kinds of things. So I think just really to let someone else help, and not feel like you have to do it all on your own.
Thank you. What steps might be taken to educate pastors on mental health issues?
One of the projects I've worked on significantly in 2012 and 2013 is called the Mental Health Initiative, and it is designed to do just that. I worked with 27 congregations on developing mental health outreach programs in partnership with community, and this included bringing education into the congregation through speakers, through people who have lived experience. And I think this is really the place to start, is to invite people with lived experience to share their story, their educational materials from DBSA, from NAMI, from the National Institute of Mental Health, from the National Council on Behavioral Health, from American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, that all can be available, set out in accessible places, resource books that can be purchased. And I think the Mental Health Awareness Month in May is just an excellent time to tap into a series of events and speakers and education events, because this is happening all over the United States, and to resource people into what's happening into the community and to partner in events in the community at that time.
I am an LMFT with a 9-year-old little girl with bipolar. I am also a woman of faith and want to find purpose in our struggle and a way to give back. How did you begin the process of deciding how to give back and share your story in order to support and help others?
Wow. I just give you so much I just really honor this person for being a parent, and I hope that I could, my heart goes out to you to be able to give you some support and encouragement for your daily journey and your daily walk. Really on giving back and sharing my story happened very, very slowly, because at many points, I just wasn't ready. But as I shared one person at a time, what happened is other people began to come to me and say, can we talk? And so it really starts with talking one person, at a time. And then other opportunities came to talk in small groups or to write. And I have to say, sometimes when I share my story, it's I'm very nervous. I'm maybe not in a good place to be able to do it. But I just do the best that I can and hope that someone else can find, a connection. I don't know if that answers the question.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Any recommendations for readings regarding the correlation between spirituality and mania? In my own experience, I have had a hard time separating them, and since my recovery, have had a difficult time feeling committed to my spirituality and reconnecting with my church.
Well, I don't know if I can, off the top of my head, think about particular readings on spirituality and mania. I wish there was something that was, prominent that I could, pull out of my head. There are some a blog of a pastor, I believe, in California, and I can get this information to the person who asked this question later, who has a blog that writes about some of this experience. It's in spirituality and mania, isn't it? It's quite a conundrum to think, is this experience that I'm having psychotic? Should I believe it? Is it real? Should I dismiss it? Or does some type of spiritual experience really, can I draw and glean meaning and purpose for my life from this? I think that's a question that a person has to answer individually, but I do encourage, if there can be a trusted person who really understands both of these areas of life, to be able to talk about this with someone to help sort it out. I did have this type of experience twice, and it helped greatly to have a person to talk with and be able to sort out what this experience actually meant in my life.
Thank you. Last question. Would some of your work with church communities be available for study?
Yes. I'm not sure what kind of study a person, would want. I have the program that I've developed called the Mental Health Initiative. You can email me and I can tell the person more about this. The particular research I'm doing on spirituality with persons who live with bipolar disorder, I presented that in June with the International Society of Bipolar Disorders, and I'm concluding that research coming up in early 2011, and I'm going to be sharing that on another webinar here on February 5th, talking specifically about that research. But I'm happy to share what I'm doing with anyone, and just send me an email.
Great. Thank you, Cheryl, so much. And there were many thanks for sharing your story sent in. Thank you all for joining us, and have a great day.
All right. Thank you.